In 1897, British soldiers marched into a West African city and found something they didn't expect. Not poverty, not chaos. Bronze. Thousands of pieces of it. Cast with a precision European workshops couldn't match for another 300 years. They took it all. Then they burned the city to the ground. This is the story of how one of Africa's most advanced kingdoms fell, and why the objects stolen from it are still fought over today. Before the fire, there was the Kingdom of Benin. Not the modern country of Benin, a different place entirely. This kingdom sat in what is now southern Nigeria, and by the 1400s it was already old, already powerful, already rich. Its capital, Benin City, was laid out on a grid centuries before European city planners thought to try it. A Dutch visitor in 1602 wrote that the main street was wider than any in Amsterdam. The kingdom ran on bronze. Not decoration, record-keeping. Every Oba, every king, commissioned plaques and heads cast by a guild of artists who answered to the palace alone. Break the guild's monopoly and you could lose a hand. This wasn't craft, it was state infrastructure. Benin's way of writing its own history in metal that doesn't rot. By the late 1800s, the reigning Oba was Ovonramwen. He inherited a kingdom that had survived 700 years of wars, succession disputes, and foreign traders. He would not survive the British. By the 1890s, Britain didn't just want to trade with Benin, it wanted to own the trade. Palm oil, rubber, ivory. The Royal Niger Company held a charter from the British Crown, and that charter was, in practice, a license to expand, with or without permission from the kingdoms already there. Benin controlled its own trade routes and taxed anyone who used them. That made the kingdom an obstacle. Obstacles, in the language of empire, get resolved. In January 1897, a British official named James Phillips decided to resolve this one himself. He planned to march into Benin City, uninvited, during a sacred festival period when outsiders were forbidden, and force a new trade agreement by removing the Oba if necessary. He was warned twice. Benin's messengers told him plainly, "Not now, not during this ceremony, come back later." Phillips ignored both warnings and advanced anyway. Benin's chiefs saw an armed foreign column entering the kingdom during a religious rite that outsiders were forbidden to witness. In their eyes, this wasn't diplomacy, it was an invasion. They ambushed the column. Phillips and most of his men were killed. In London, the story that reached the newspapers had one detail missing: the two warnings. What Britain heard was simpler, and it needed to be simpler. A British mission massacred by savages. That single sentence was about to justify everything that came next. Within weeks, Britain assembled what it called the Benin Punitive Expedition. Over 1,000 men, rockets, Maxim guns, weapons that could fire hundreds of rounds a minute against an army that had none. This wasn't a rescue mission. The word was already in the name: punitive, punishment. They advanced on Benin City in February 1897. The kingdom's forces fought, but Maxim guns against spears and old trade muskets isn't a battle. It's an equation with only one answer. The city fell in days. What happened next is the part most documentaries skip. British troops didn't just occupy Benin City. They set it on fire. Whether by accident from stored gunpowder or deliberately, accounts differ, but the result didn't. Palaces that had stood for centuries burned in hours. Bronze doesn't burn, but everything around it did. And that, in a strange way, is why so much of it survived. It was pulled from ash instead of pulled from a functioning kingdom. Soldiers moved through the ruins, collecting what remained. Thousands of bronze plaques, carved ivory tusks, coral regalia worn only by the Oba himself. Officers described rooms stacked floor to ceiling with cast metal, more than anyone expected to find in what British newspapers had called a primitive kingdom just weeks earlier. The irony wasn't lost on everyone, but it changed nothing. The objects were crated, shipped to London, and sold, many at auction, specifically to cover the cost of the expedition that stole them. Oba of Onramwen fled the city. He was captured months later, tried without real defense, and exiled to Calabar, 400 kilometers from his throne. He would die there in 1914, having never returned home. Here's what makes this story different from most colonial plunder. We can trace almost every piece. The Benin Bronzes didn't disappear into private hands and vanish. They were catalogued, sold, and shipped to major museums almost immediately. The British Museum, Berlin's Ethnological Museum, museums in Vienna, Chicago, New York. Today, an estimated 3,000 to 5,000 pieces sit outside Nigeria, most of them in Europe. For over a century, they sat in glass cases with small placards. Rarely did those placards mention how the objects arrived. Acquired in 1897 is doing a lot of quiet work in that sentence. Then in the 2020s, something shifted. Germany agreed to return ownership of over 1,000 bronzes to Nigeria. The Smithsonian followed. The Netherlands followed. Even institutions that resisted for decades started, quietly, moving pieces back. The debate that followed wasn't really about metal. It was about who gets to hold the memory of what happened, and who gets to decide what returning something even means when the kingdom it was taken from no longer exists in the same form. Nigeria built a new museum specifically to receive them. Some bronzes have already made the journey home. Most, as of today, have not. What happened to Benin in 1897 wasn't an isolated event. It was one afternoon in a much longer pattern. A kingdom with functioning government, art and law, dismantled in under a week because it had something an empire wanted and no way to stop the guns aimed at it. The bronzes survive because bronze survives. The city that made them, the guild system that protected them, the kingdom that gave them meaning, those didn't get the same chance. Every plaque now sitting under museum glass in London or Berlin was cast to record something specific: a king, a victory, a ceremony. They were never meant to be admired behind glass, in silence, in a country that isn't Nigeria. That's the part restitution debates keep circling back to. It's not just where the object sits. It's whether the story it was made to tell can ever be told the way it was meant to be heard again. The fire that took Benin City lasted a few days. The argument over what was taken from it has now lasted longer than most empires do. If you want to understand how a kingdom disappears from the map but never from memory, subscribe. This is the history nobody puts in the textbook, and there's a lot more of it.